like the way he presented his books.
Over 70 years old, and he comes from Norway.
I don't know much about Roald Dahl, but I know a lot about his books.
Well, he's a terrific writer. I really like his writing.
He's a great author because I've got most of his books.
I was really surprised because some people say he's really cantankerous, but he was really nice and he's not mean at all.
He makes lots of children happy.
Oh, he's a nice man. He's a great storyteller. To come and see Roald Dahl was a good experience for me.
Welcome to the wonderful world of Roald Dahl. This is one in a series of 4 programs recorded live at the Dallas Brooks Hall. We're sure that you'll enjoy watching and listening to Roald Dahl as much as you've enjoyed reading his books.
Not time for many more, but we have one here. Let's try and find the clue to it. Here it is. It says, what about a small boy who mixes up all the medicines and the cooking utensil things in the house? And that's all it says. So there we are. You know what's the matter with you, the old woman said, staring at George over the rim of the teacup with those bright, wicked little eyes. You're growing too fast. Boys who grow too fast become stupid and lazy. But I can't help it if I'm growing fast, Grandma, George said. Of course you can, she snapped. Growing's a nasty, childish habit. But we have to grow, Grandma. If we didn't grow, we'd never be grown-ups. Rubbish, boy, rubbish, she said. Look at me. Am I growing? Certainly not. But you did once, Grandma. Only very little, the old woman answered. I gave up growing when I was extremely small, along with all the other nasty, childish habits like laziness and disobedience and greed and sloppiness and untidiness and stupidity. You haven't given up any of these things, have you? I'm still only a little boy, Grandma. You're 8 years old, she snorted. That's old enough to know better. If you don't stop growing soon, it'll be too late. Too late for what, Grandma? It's ridiculous, she went on. You're nearly as tall as me already. George took a good look at Grandma. She was certainly a very tiny person. Her legs were so short she had to have a footstool to put her feet on, and her head only came halfway up the back of the armchair. Daddy says it's fine for a man to be tall, George said. Don't listen to your daddy, Grandma said. Listen to me. But how do I stop myself growing, George asked her. Eat less chocolate, Grandma said. But does chocolate make you grow? It makes you grow the wrong way, she snapped. Up instead of down. Grandma sipped some tea, but never took her eyes from the little boy who stood before her. Never grow up, she said. Always down. Yes, Grandma. And stop eating chocolate. Eat cabbage instead. Cabbage? Oh, no, I don't like cabbage, George said. It's not what you like or what you don't like, Grandma snapped. It's what's good for you that counts. From now on, you must eat cabbage 3 times a day, mountains of it. And if it's got caterpillars in it, so much the better. Ouch, George said. Caterpillars give you brains, the old woman said. Mummy washes them down the sink, George said. Mummy's as stupid as you are, Grandma said. Cabbage doesn't taste of anything without a few boiled caterpillars in it. Slugs, too. Not slugs, George cried out. I couldn't eat slugs. Whenever I see a live slug on a piece of lettuce, Grandma said, I gobble it up quick before it crawls away. Delicious. She squeezed her lips together tight so that her mouth became a tiny wrinkled hole. Delicious, she said again. Worms and slugs and beetly bugs. You don't know what's good for you. You're joking, Grandma. I never joke, she said. Beetles are perhaps the best of all. They go crunch. Grandma, that's beastly. The old hag grinned, showing those pale brown teeth. Sometimes, if you're lucky, she said, you get a beetle inside the stem of a stick of celery. That's what I like. Grandma, how could you? You find all sorts of nice things in sticks of raw celery, the old woman went on. Sometimes it's earwigs. I don't want to hear about it, George said, and so on. There we are. Now, we don't have a lot more time. I'll tell you, we've only before the questions, we've only got time for one Dirty Beasts, and that's about all. So I'll choose one. Some wealthy folks from USA who lived near San Francisco Bay possessed an only child called Roy, a plump and unattractive boy, half-baked, half-witted, and half-boiled, but worst of all, most dreadfully spoiled. Whatever Roy desired each day, his father bought him right away. Toy motor cars, electric trains, the latest model aeroplanes, a colored television set, a saxophone, a clarinet, expensive teddy bears that talked, and animals that walked and squawked. That house contained sufficient toys to thrill 500,000 boys. As well as this, young Roy would choose 2 pairs a week of brand new shoes. And now he stood there shouting, "What on earth is there I haven't got?" How hard to think of something new. The choices are extremely few. Then added, as he scratched his ear, "Hold it, I've got a good idea. But I think the next thing I must get should be a most unusual pet, the kind that no one else has got. A giant anteater, why not?" As soon as father heard the news, he quickly wrote to all the zoos. "Dear sirs," he said, "my dear keepers, do any of you have anteaters?" They answered by return of mail, "Our anteaters are not for sale." Undaunted, Roy's fond parent hurled more messages across the world. He said, "I'll pay you through the nose if you can get me one of those." At last he found an Indian gent. He lived near Delhi in a tent, who said that he would sacrifice his pet for an enormous price. The price demanded, if you please, was 50,000 gold rupees. The anteater arrived half dead. It looked at Roy and softly said, "I'm famished. Do you think you could provide me just a little food? Please give me just a little, a crust of bread, a bit of meat. I haven't had a thing to eat in all the time I was at sea, for nobody looked after me." Roy shouted, "No, no bread or meat. Go find some ants, that's what you eat." The starving creature crawled away. It searched the garden night and day. It hunted every inch of ground, but not one single ant it found. By chance, upon that very day, Roy's father's sister came to stay, a foul old hag of 83, whose name, it seems, was Dorothy. She said to Roy, "Come, let us sit out in the sun and talk a bit." Roy said, "I don't believe you've met my new and most unusual pet." He pointed down among the stones where something lay, all skin and bones. "An ant-eater," he yelled. "Don't lie there yawning. This is my ant. Come say good morning." You see, some people in the USA have trouble with the words they say. However hard they try, they can't pronounce a simple word like aunt. Instead of aunt, they call it ant. Instead of can't, they call it can't. Roy yelled, "Come here, you so-and-so. My aunt would like to say hello." Slowly the creature raised its head. "Do you mean that that's an ant?" it said. "Of course," cried Roy. "Aunt Dorothy. This ant is over 83. The creature smiled. Its tummy rumbled. It licked its starving lips and mumbled, "A giant ant. By gosh, a winner. At last I'll get a decent dinner. No matter if it's 83, if that's an ant, then it's for me." Then, taking very careful aim, it pounced upon the startled dame. It grabbed her firmly by the hair and ate her up right then and there, murmuring as it chewed the feet, "The largest ant I'll ever eat." Meanwhile, our hero, Roy, had sped in terror to the potting shed and tried to make himself obscure behind a pile of horse manure. But Anteater came sneaking in. Already it was much less thin, and said to Roy, "You little squirt, I think I'll have you for dessert." There we are. Now then. We end with the very last little verse from another book, which says, "We have tears in our eyes as we weigh our goodbyes. We so love being with you, we three. So do please now and then come and see us again, the giraffe and the Pelly and me. All you do is you look at a page in this book, because that's where we always will be. No book ever ends when it's full of your friends, the giraffe and the Pelly and me." There we are. Now we're going to have the lights on, and we're going to have a few intelligent questions.
Are you going to write any more books?
I don't know. The minstrel is infirm and old. His withered cheeks and tatters grey seem to have known a better day. I don't know. I don't have a single one in my head, but when I get home, I shall probably start fiddling away with something. I don't know. I hope so.
What's your family like?
My family is jolly nice. It always has been, even when I was young. But at the moment, my family consists of 4 of my own children, 3 girls and a boy, all in their 20s, or one's over 30. I have 4 grandchildren now. The oldest is about 11, Sophie, who I wrote about in the BFG. And in my family, very much so, is my wife, Lissy, the wildly attractive girl I referred to earlier on in this little talk. And she also has 3 children, and we're all one family, and there's Lissy and I and 7 children, 6 girls and 1 boy. And we all talk to each other nearly every day, except when we're in Australia and all the times are squiggled round and you can't get them. They're asleep when we're awake.
Where did you get the ideas from Danny the Champion of the World from?
Yes, that's one of the few where'd you get questions that I can answer. Because after the war, when I was living in Buckinghamshire, I had a great friend who worked in a butcher's shop, and his name was Claude. And he was an old poacher. And he used to take me out in the woods at night, and all around us, the rich men had woods filled with pheasants that they were breeding for shooting down. And we really did used to creep into those woods in the dead of night and try to poach pheasants. And there were keepers there with guns and everything. Enormously exciting, enormous fun. The only thing I have to confess is we never managed to catch a single pheasant. Not one. Mind you, most of the ways in Danny of catching pheasants I invented. The only really true one that is true is pheasants do love raisins. And Claude used to use raisins, but mainly he used a rabbit snare on the end of a long bamboo, and when the pheasants were roosting, when a pheasant roosts, it puts his neck right in. And you hold the snare up in front of it and you go psst, and the pheasant meant to shoot its neck out, and you pull it down. But whenever we did that, it just flew away. So there you are.
If you thought of a book in Australia, would you stay here and write it or go back to England?
I could never write it in Australia or any other country or anywhere in England except in my little tiny work hut up in the orchard where I've written all my stories. So that's an easy answer. I would find it, after all these years, very, very difficult to write one anywhere else. But I'd love to find an idea in Australia to take home. That would be lovely, because I don't have one at the moment. I'll have to start looking through this old brown book and see if anything comes up.
How did you think up the funny words in the BFG?
The BFG, I read the first chapter, and it was all right, but it needed something to spark it up. I thought, this is not nearly sparky enough. And then I suddenly thought, if I put these funny words in, it will help it. And then all the way through, I just thought up, well, you could do it. If you have a go, you'll think up all sorts of funny words like that.
Who were the characters based on in the Twits?
I based Mr. Twit on a sort of mixture of every man in the world who has a big beard. Some of them, I will admit, especially if they're your fathers or your teachers, I'll admit they might be quite nice men, but they're still twits to wear beards. I've never understood why a man does it, or why he's trying to hide his face behind a sort of hedge of fur and stuff. I don't understand it. Unless he's got the most awful scars or had smallpox or something. If he's got a perfectly decent face, I find it hard to understand. And if I was a woman, I don't think I'd want to go near him.
Which of your books has been made into films?
5 so far, but you've only seen one, and that one was lousy. That's Charlie. And it really was a lousy. It wasn't my fault. We had a lousy director who changed the plot and the book. But last year, three more were made, the BFG and Danny and the Witches. And let's hope that they are better than Charlie was.